The market pulsed with life, a mosaic of colors, smells, and voices rising like heat from the cracked concrete. Traders shouted over one another, vying for attention with their goods, vibrant heaps of tomatoes, bolts of patterned Ankara, the sharp scent of dried fish mingling with roasted corn. In the middle of the crowd moved a shadow. Toby, 16, bones poking through his threadbare shirt, feet caked in the dust of Lagos. His eyes, quick and searching, flitted across faces and stalls like a hawk, looking for weakness. Hunger twisted his insides, but it was the kind that had long since stopped growling. Now it was quiet, bitter, and sharp. He spotted her near a wooden stall stacked with plantains, some ripe and yellow, others darkening with sugar. Mama Adesua, known to most for her quiet dignity, stood counting her notes with thin fingers worn, smooth by years. Her wrapper clung to her small frame, and her gel sat like a crown atop greying hair. Toby's eyes locked on the brown purse resting on the bench beside her, just within reach. No one watched, no one ever did. In one smooth, practiced motion, he lunged, snatched the purse, and bolted. The air shifted, shouts rang out brief, annoyed reactions from vendors to jaded to care. "Ah, another thief," someone muttered, barely glancing up. No one ran after him, but something made Toby glance back, just once. Mama Adesua hadn't screamed. She hadn't cursed him, hadn't reached out or flailed her arms. She had simply turned and looked at him, looked through him. Her gaze wasn't angry, just steady, deep. Knowing for a moment, the din of the market fell away, and that look clung to him like dust in his throat. Hours later, tucked beneath a rusted zinc overhang, he opened the purse. The stolen reward was pitiful, just a few crumpled Naira notes, not even enough for a proper meal, but tucked in a side pocket was a photo, creased and soft at the edges. It showed a boy, no older than Toby, smiling shyly at the camera, his eyes bright with something Toby could not name. He stared at the photo, then at the money, then back at the photo. His stomach still ached, but now something else gnawed him. Guilt, not the usual flash of shame he could swallow. This was heavier, colder. That woman's face, that calm, searching look. Why hadn't she screamed? Why had she let him go so easily? The questions swirled like dust devils in his mind, and for the first time in a long time, Toby didn't feel like the smartest boy on the street. He just felt small and dirty, unseen dot under the hulking belly of the third mainland bridge, where the roar of traffic never truly fades and the night brings more danger than rest. Toby made his home. Cardboard and old tires formed makeshift bedding, and rusted pots sat beside puddles of oil-streaked water. He was one of many, a ghost in the city's underbelly, surviving on instinct and speed. Life had taught him early to trust no one too quickly and to take what he could before someone stronger did. His mother had died when he was 11, a brief illness, poorly treated, snatching her away in their one-room apartment. His father had vanished before that, swallowed by the city's chaos or its sins. Toby never knew which. At first, he'd been taken in by an uncle, then an aunt, but both homes turned cold quickly, with heavy hands and harsher words. By 12, he had run, trading a bed for the brutal freedom of the streets. Street life carved away his innocence in rough edges. He stole because there was no other way to eat. He lied when it kept him safe. But there was a line he rarely crossed. He didn't pick from children, didn't hurt the weak. Among the cluster of boys under the bridge, he became a quiet protector. He shared scraps when he could. He taught the smaller ones how to run fast and hide better. Still, Toby remembered another version of himself, neatly uniformed, holding a pencil, laughing with his mother in the mornings before school. He remembered warm food, clean water, and the pride on her face when he read aloud. That boy still lived inside him, buried beneath dirt and disappointment, surfacing only in dreams. His closest friend in this world was Rashid, dirt by a few years and shaped by harder battles. Rashid was lean muscle and sharp suspicion, a boy already becoming the kind of man you didn't cross. He looked out for Toby, but never sugarcoated life. That evening, when Toby showed him the purse and the photo, Rashid scoffed, his voice low and biting. "Don't grow a conscience now," he said, tossing the purse aside like garbage. "Conscience will kill you before hunger does." Toby said nothing, but his eyes lingered on the photo. He couldn't explain the ache in his chest or the way that old woman's look still haunted him across the city. Mama Adesuwa moved through her small, tidy flat with the grace of someone who had known both great sorrow and deep purpose. The walls held photos of days-gone hospital staff in crisp uniforms, a young boy grinning wide with a soccer ball in hand. Her son, Michael, had been her pride, her joy. He had wanted to be a nurse like her once, but the streets had other plans. A wrong friendship, a bad night, and a bullet had taken him before his 18th birthday. Since then, she had poured her love into the community, tending to aching backs, wounded pride, and frightened girls with nowhere else to go. The market women adored her. Pregnant teenagers whispered her name like a blessing. Street kids knew to knock gently on her back door when the pain became too much. That day in the market, she had felt Michael's memory stir as she counted her change. Then came the sudden tug, the purse vanishing from beside her hand in its place, the fleeting blur of a boy running. But it wasn't anger that rose in her, it was recognition. In that split second, she had seen his eyes. They were so much like Michael's, sharp but unsure, defensive but pleading. So she hadn't screamed, hadn't chased, hadn't called for help. Instead, she whispered softly to no one but herself, "This one isn't lost, not yet." The photo in the purse was of Michael, aged 16, the same age Toby was now. She kept it with her always, a talisman against forgetting. Seeing that boy take her bag had broken something open again, but not with rage, with hope, maybe. A foolish, fragile hope that some part of Michael still walked the world, trying to find his way back. That night, as she brewed herbs in silence, her thoughts drifted to the boy with quick hands and haunted eyes. She didn't know his name, didn't know where he slept or how he survived, but she felt something shift, something that told her their paths weren't finished yet. Somewhere out there, under a bridge, Toby stared at that same photo, feeling the same echo of grief and confusion. Two strangers, bound by loss, had seen each other for a moment, and it had been enough to change everything. The next morning, the market buzzed with its usual noise, shouting traders, squawking chickens, and the rhythmic slap of palm against yam. Amid it all, Toby lingered at the edge, half hidden behind a rusted kiosk. He didn't know why he'd come back. Maybe it was the look in her eyes. Maybe it was the photo. Maybe it was just hunger. His stomach felt hollow, twisted tight around itself. He watched Mama Adesuwa from a distance as she arranged her plantains, exchanging warm greetings with the women around her. She looked ordinary, kind even, like someone's grandmother. Yet she had seen him, really seen him, and hadn't raised her voice. That confused him more than anything. She noticed him almost immediately. Her eyes flicked up, found his, and held them. No alarm, no surprise, just calm recognition. Toby froze, one foot already shifted to run, but she didn't shout, didn't call for the market guards. Instead, she reached behind her stall, wrapped something in a napkin, and walked toward him, slow and steady, like someone coaxing a frightened animal. He tensed, unsure whether to flee or wait. When she stopped a few feet away, she held out a small plastic bowl with rice and beans, a slice of fried plantain resting on top. Steam curled from it, and the smell hit him like a slap-warm reel. "Food. You should eat," she said simply, no scolding in her voice. Toby narrowed his eyes. "Why?" "Because you're hungry," she answered. Then she set the bowl on the edge of a low wall beside him and turned to go. He hesitated for a long moment, his pride battling with the ache in his belly. Then, glancing quickly around, he grabbed the bowl and devoured its contents in greedy, silent bites. She didn't look back. She gave him space. Later, when the stall quieted down and the rush of customers faded, she approached him again. This time, she carried a worn paperback book in one hand. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Why are you alone?" she asked. Not accusing, just asking. Toby looked away, chewing the last bits of rice. He said nothing. She didn't press. There was no threat in her presence, just a stillness that made it harder to lie or pretend. She held out the book, a weathered novel, with faded print. "When you're ready," she said, placing it on the same low wall. "Read this. I'll be here tomorrow." Toby frowned, but took the book when she left. Inside the front cover was a small, sealed envelope, almost invisible. That night, beneath the bridge, with the others curled around their fires and laughter echoing like glass breaking, he opened it. 5,000 folded neatly, untouched. He stared at the money as if it might vanish. It wasn't a fortune, but to him it might as well have been a mountain. Enough to buy food for days, maybe even clean clothes. But it wasn't just the money, it was the trust. She hadn't said a word about the stolen purse. She'd just offered this. He didn't go back the next day. He kept his distance. Distrust still ran deep in him. Rashid would have laughed if he knew. "Trap," he'd say. "No one gives without wanting something back." But that night, as the others snored, Toby held the book in his hands, flipping the pages, pretending he wasn't rereading the first chapter again and again. Something tugged at him, not just guilt, not just curiosity. It was something quieter, more dangerous, hope. On the third day, as the market began to stir, he returned. This time, he didn't hide. He didn't speak either. He just walked up and sat on a crate near her stall, legs crossed, face unreadable. Mama Adesua looked at him, her face softening with something close to relief, but she said nothing. She handed him a piece of akara and kept arranging her fruit, letting the silence settle gently between them. Toby didn't thank her, didn't explain, but he stayed, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, Toby returned to the market almost every day. He never said much, and neither did Mama Adesua. Their connection grew not through words, but through gestures, quiet, consistent, and steady like the rhythm of breath. She never once mentioned the purse. Instead, she began asking small things of him. "Carry this basket, fetch pepper from that stall, help count change." At first, Toby moved like someone expecting to be tricked, but over time, he stopped flinching. She gave him clean clothes, second-hand, but neatly washed hand. When she cooked at the back of the stall, she let him help. Under her watchful eye, he learned to slice onions without crying, to stir palm oil into stew until it shimmered. She taught him how to cook okra soup, how to balance spices. It felt foregental, domestic, a different kind of survival. The other boys noticed. They teased him at first, laughing that he'd become the market woman's pet. Rashid, always watching from the shadows of the street, wasn't so amused. One evening under the bridge, as they shared stale bread, Rashid fixed him with a hard stare. "She's softening you," he said, voice low and serious. "You'll get weak, and weakness gets you killed." Toby shrugged, pretending not to care. "She gives me food. It's just errands." But the words hit deeper than he let on, because he was changing. He still stole when he needed to, still slept rough, still watched his back. But now, when Mama Adesua smiled at him or handed him warm bread without asking for anything, something twisted inside. Shame, maybe. Or something older longing. He hadn't belonged anywhere in years. And now, here was this woman, broken by loss, still opening her hands to him like a mother would, Then came the day the world tilted. Toby had just come back from a quick delivery when he saw the small crowd gathering near her stall. Panic bloomed in his chest as he pushed through the bodies. Mama Adesua was on the ground, one hand clutching her chest, her face pale and soaked with sweat. The women were trying to help, fanning her with wrappers, shouting for someone to get a kick to the clinic. Toby's heart thudded wildly as he knelt beside her. She tried to speak, but her lips trembled too much at the hospital. The truth came in low voices and long silences. Her heart was weak, too weak. She needed treatment, medications, and likely surgery. The bills stacked like insults. Toby sat in the waiting area, numb. The woman he'd stolen from, who had fed him, clothed him, trusted him, she was going to sell her only piece of land to pay for her survival. He overheard it in hushed conversation, the old plot in her village, all she had left of her family legacy. The guilt hit like a punch to the ribs. That night, he dug through his small bag, beneath the bridge, and pulled out the tattered, purse-greased, faded, and worn from weeks of hiding. The photo was still inside, edges curling. The next morning, he brought it to her bedside. She looked frail, smaller than he'd ever seen her, but her eyes lit up at the sight of him. Wordlessly, he placed the purse in her hands, his throat too thick with emotion to speak. "I'm sorry," he managed to whisper, eyes burning, but she just smiled, that soft, unshakable smile of hers. "I forgave you the moment you took it," she said. That broke him. The armor he'd built over years, every harsh word, every hunger pang, every beating shattered under the weight of her grace. He left the hospital in silence, his chest cracked wide open. That night, Rashid found him. The older boy leaned against a wall, cigarette between his lips, watching Toby with narrowed eyes. "You want to save her?" he asked, voice like gravel. "I've got something. One job. Big one. Just one." Toby hesitated. Everything in him screamed to run, but desperation blurred his judgment. He nodded. "The plan was simple," Rashid said. "A private party in Lakirich Kids. Loud music, too many drinks, phones, watches, wallets, easy pickings, no guns, just speed. In and out, but nothing went according to plan. The compound was crawling with security. One of the boys screamed when Toby grabbed his phone, drawing attention. Alarms blared in the chaos. Rashid vanished. Toby ran, feet pounding, but a guard tackled him before he made it past the gate. Hands dragged him up, fists rained down, voices shouting, accusing. Blood filled his mouth, but all he could think about was Mama Adesua lying in that hospital bed, and how badly he had failed her, again. Toby sat on the cold cement floor of the police station, his shirt torn, lips split, and wrists bruised from the rough grip of the guards. The air smelled of sweat, metal, and hopelessness. His mind raced, in loops of shame, anger, and fear, not for himself, but for Mama Adesua. He had wanted to help her, to repay her kindness, and instead he had failed in the most humiliating way. Now she would know he was nothing more than a street rat, just another boy who couldn't escape what the world had carved into him. Hours passed before he heard her voice, soft but firm, breaking through the gruff murmurs of the station. Mama Adesua walked in, fragile but upright, wrapped in a faded blue wrapper, her headscarf neat despite her weakness. She shouldn't have been out of bed. Her heart was still healing. Yet there she was, standing between him and whatever punishment waited. When the officer explained what had happened, she didn't look shocked or angry. She just sighed, like a mother who had seen too much sorrow to be surprised by more. "He's not a criminal," she told the officer, her voice trembling. "He's a good boy who made a mistake. He just needs a chance." Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke, and for a long moment the room fell quiet. Even the officer, bored and hardened by his job, shifted uncomfortably. Then another man stepped forward, well-dressed, clean-shaven, with an expensive watch glinting at his wrist. The victim, the one whose phone had been stolen. He had the quiet confidence of someone used to being listened to. But when he saw Mama Adesowa, something changed in his face. "Auntie," he said. Stunned, she looked up, surprised, and recognition dawned slowly. "David," she whispered. Barrister David, the man whose stolen phone had brought. Toby Herewise, the best friend of Mama Adesowa's late son, Michael. Years had aged him, but the connection was immediate. They embraced briefly, awkwardly, grief flickering in their eyes. David spoke gently, respectfully, remembering how she had patched his wounds when he and Michael played too rough, how her jollof rice had fed half the neighborhood. "I didn't know the boy was connected to you," he said quietly. She nodded. "He reminds me of Michael." David looked at Toby then, differently, not just as a thief, but as a boy shaped by the same streets that had once stolen his friend. He hesitated, then turned to the officer. "I won't press charges," he said, "but there's a condition." Everyone tensed. "He goes into a reform program, education, skills, training. If he wants to stay out of trouble, he needs structure." Toby's head shot up, his pride flared, hot and reckless. "I don't need saving," he spat. "I didn't ask for this." Silence followed his outburst. Mama Adesowa stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "I didn't come to save you," she said softly. "I came to remind you who you are." The words hit like a sledgehammer. Something cracked open inside him, the boy who once held a pencil with joy, who memorized poems in school, who laughed beside his mother. The boy he had buried under years of dirt, loss, and rage. That boy hadn't died. He had just been waiting. And now, standing before him, was the one person who had seen through every lie he wore, every mask he'd put on to survive. Toby dropped his gaze. His shoulders began to shake. And then, for the first time in years, he cried. Not silent tears, not the quick wipe of shame, but full sobs, raw, loud, uncontrollable. Years of pain poured out in a police station, while Mama Adesowa stood by him, hand on his shoulder, unshaken. "I'll do it," he said through the tears. "I'll try." And for the first time in a very long while, he meant it. Toby's life didn't change overnight, but it began with small, steady steps. Through Barrister David's connections, he was enrolled in a youth development program, a place filled with other boys like him, all carrying different scars, different battles. The center provided shelter, food, and classes, but more than that, it gave him structure, safety, and for the first time, a sense of direction. He moved out from under the bridge and into a shared room with clean sheets and his own small locker. Mornings were filled with workshops and basic education. Afternoons, he returned to the market, helping vendors carry goods, manage change, and sweep their stalls. Many remembered him as the boy who once snatched a purse. Now, they nodded in approval as he worked with quiet dedication. Every week, he visited Mama Adesowa. Even as her body healed slowly, she remained the same sharp-eyed, warm, and stubborn in her gentle way. She began teaching him to read properly, sounding out words from old books and marking errors with a red pen. He took it seriously. Sometimes they read aloud together. Other times, they just sat, comfortable, in silence. She encouraged him to write, and he did tentative at first. Then, with growing confidence, he kept a worn blue notebook, filling page after page with memories, questions, and moments that had shaped him. On the cover, he scrawled in blocked letters, "My life, before and after a stolen purse." As weeks passed, Mama Adesowa's health began to improve. The market women, moved by her kindness and quiet resilience, started raising small contributions to help with her medication. A local church helped with regular checkups. Her laughter returned, light and musical, often when she saw Toby arguing playfully with vendors or pretending to haggle too hard over peppers. He no longer blended into the shadows. He walked with purpose, one warm afternoon. As the sun stretched long shadows across the market stalls, Toby sat beside her, reading aloud from something he had written. His voice cracked at moments, but she listened intently, her hand resting lightly on his. When he finished, she looked at him for a long time, her eyes shining. "You were the son I was meant to find," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Toby blinked hard, his chest tightening. He reached for her hand and held it carefully, as if anchoring himself to the moment. "And you," he said softly, "are the mother I lost and found again." There were no more words after that, just the quiet of two souls, wounded but healing, sitting side by side beneath the market sky, no longer strangers, no longer broken, just a boy and a woman who saved each other. 2 years later, Toby stood at the front of a modest community center, facing a group of young boys who looked not unlike the one he had once been, wide-eyed, bruised by life, but still flickering with something unbroken. He held up a worn photograph, Mama Adesua, younger, standing beside a teenage boy with a confident smile, her late son, Michael. The room fell silent. "I once stole from this woman," Toby said, his voice steady but full. "But she didn't scream. She didn't curse. She gave me something I didn't even know I had lost, my humanity." His eyes swept the room. "She saw the boy I buried under anger and fear. She reminded me that I was still worth saving, and that I could still become more than my past." At the front row sat Mama Adesua, now in a wheelchair, her frame but her presence still strong, dignified. Her eyes never left him, full of pride, love, and quiet joy. Toby stepped down after his talk, crossing the room to kneel beside her. He held her hand, the same hand that had once offered him bread, forgiveness, and a future. She leaned in, her voice soft. Michael would have been proud. Toby looked at her, eyes shining. "He lives in me now." They sat like that for a moment, surrounded by young voices, the echo of hope hanging in the air. As the sounds of laughter and conversation swelled around them, the camera would have faded out, not on their words, but on their hands, gently intertwined, a symbol of redemption, legacy, and love that refused to be broken.